Gangway there.
Which way, please?
Gangway. Gangway there. That's a cut the boat.
The bus begins its trip from the airport to Celtic Park. There's the bus, there are the players, everyone's very happy indeed.
In 1967, Glasgow Celtic became the first British team to win the European Cup.
Jimmo. Brother. It's goal! Celtic has scored!
All you were doing was excitement, just jumping about. Oh, you're a dancer, you know.
And onto the field come thousands of Celtic fans. This is a great moment.
I don't think I'd ever seen my dad with tears in his eyes before, but he literally had tears in his eyes and he gave me a big massive hug, which I don't ever remember him doing before.
When I watch it all, I just sit and bubble all the way through it. And yet, it is my happiest football memory.
Thousands lined the streets of Glasgow to welcome the team home. 50 years on,
How are you?
fans still greet them as returning heroes.
I love singing with them. I love applauding with them. And I love what they love, that team.
It just changed our lives forever. I mean, this is 50 years on. I still talk about it.
Most people remember Bobby because he was a great player, but a lot of people know that he was a good man.
As boys, these players beat impoverishment, illness and intolerance before they'd even pulled on their boots. They learned to believe in themselves.
I was the shyest guy in the world. I was embarrassed going to join in the guys playing football, so I just left, didn't play.
They saw a big man held back by small minds.
He was very, very upset. And there were tears.
And the scorer who secured glory for Glasgow was the man who survived its deadliest disease.
We're very sorry. This is the diagnosis. You've got 3 weeks to live.
On that sunlit May evening 50 years ago, the 11 men brought back not just a trophy, but history, hope and happiness to the proud people of Glasgow. (1967). The moment when the footballing world revolved around Glasgow. A Scotland team packed with Glaswegians beat world champions England at Wembley. Glasgow Rangers went all the way to the European Cup Winners' Cup final, only to lose in extra time. And most fantastically of all, Glasgow Celtic won the greatest prize in European football with a team who were all born within 30 miles of the stadium. But in many ways, Glasgow was an unlikely setting for a fairy tale.
So you've come to Glasgow, have you? Pretty grim, isn't it?
This was a city with a reputation for hard men and poverty-blighted lives, for gangs, for drunkenness, for sectarianism.
Glasgow was a hard place, don't kid yourself away, but a nice place. You only got to do it if you deserved it.
Mother-in-law and father.
Glasgow people love one another violently, and when they fight,
Glasgow is regarded as one of the most densely populated urban areas in the whole of Western and Central Europe at that time. It's an emphatically working-class city. The overwhelming majority of the population tended to, if you like, make their living with their hands.
Glasgow was the engine of the empire. Ships were launched in the Clyde, built from steel forged in its furnaces, and powered by coal hewn from the Lanarkshire mines. And from this male socialist culture came leaders.
The next step when you left school was to go into the pits. It was as simple and straightforward as that. I was 13 years in the pits then after that.
The story of the Lisbon Lions begins when a miner called Jock Stein swapped his pit boots for football boots. Stein captained Celtic, then in 1957, after being injured, was put in charge of the club's promising young reserve team.
All I try to do is to try and work for the players, because after all, the players work for me when they're on the field. I do my best for them off the field. I expect the same from them on the field.
One of these young players was future captain Billy McNeill. The son of a Black Watch soldier, he lived just a short bus journey from Celtic Park. On his way to training, he was joined by another hopeful youth, John Clark, who was determined to succeed after a devastating setback in his early life.
I was 10, the oldest of the family, and outside the house kicking a ball, and then the police came and asked, where does Clark stay, you know, and I says, well, that's it in there, you know. So I can always remember that the two policemen came, but they wouldn't let me in. They said, you stay outside. And next thing I heard my mother crying, so my father had been killed in a train accident. He was in the railway, he was a foreman, and my mother still expecting a child. So it was pretty hard at the time, and it was rough.
Stein took these young players under his wing. And when Celtic bought Jock a wee car, he would give Billy and John a lift home from training, teaching them about football, life, and occasionally even stopping off for fish and chips.
I think Big Billy had the bigger legs, so he'd probably be in the front. So we would have to take a back seat.
Jim Conway, a centre forward, also travelled in the car with McNeill, Clark and Stein.
Gonna build a mountain.
The players that was there, the young players that was there, were as good a player as anywhere it was going. The talent was always there.
Yeah. Build a mountain, at least I hope I will.
At that particular time, it turned out good for Celtic because we had to start a new reserve team to build towards the future.
Gonna build a mountain.
We started getting things pieced together, and I was doing not bad then.
I was the first boy he ever signed, you know. He was a father figure, you know, he cared. He was a miner at one time.
Yes,
Salt of the earth, as they call it.
Yeah.
You know, they knew down below how hard it is. Kept your level, he never let you get
too big for your boots.
That's right, he would always do that.
Keep your feet in the ground.
Gonna build a daydream, gonna see it through.
Talented and ambitious, Stein and his young colts were going places. But a meeting with the Celtic chairman shattered Big Jock's dreams.
The chairman had told him he couldn't go any further at the club because of his religion. I says, you're joking, Jock. Couldn't believe it myself, you know. Yeah, he says, it really was upset. And there were tears. He was very, very upset because he loved the club.
I was a non-Catholic. Sir Robert Kelly thought that I had gone as far as I would expect to go with a club like Celtic.
It took 5 long trophyless years before Celtic righted the wrong. In 1965, the club invited Jock to return as manager. Stein had proven himself with success at Dunfermline and Hibs, and now reunited with the players at Celtic, he impressed them with his knowledge, ambition and sheer presence.
You got to play the game in space. Billy and John Clark tighten up here at the back.
John and I'll have to make up our mind early which one of us is going to pick up the main striker.
Jock Stein encapsulated the values that we think we have as Scots. You know, no nonsense, quiet wisdom. He was clever and he commanded respect. And I think a lot of Glaswegians looked at him and said, yeah, that's the way to be.
We know normally our midfield men...
The dressing room was full of talented but underachieving players. Amongst them, the mercurial winger Jimmy Johnson, talented youngster Tommy Gemmell, and at the heart of the team, Bertie Auld.
That's a very good move, that, boss. You know, with me holding the ball in the middle of the park there, big Yogi hesitating just that few seconds to allow.
Like most of his teammates, young Bertie learned his moves on the streets of Glasgow.
This is Pan Muir Street, University Adversity.
See, as I'm standing here, honestly, I feel my legs jelly. There must be ghosts in every part of this place because see the people, honestly, they were warm, they were fabulous neighbours. My mum was out selling fruit and such like, and they would see me playing in the street maybe 5 o'clock. All the neighbours would say, "Bert, is your man on yet?" And they would roll up just a bit of bread and butter. It wouldn't be butter, it would be margarine or something like that. You know, she'd throw it out just to make sure you were going for anything to eat. Mrs. Mucklewee had that, see that light there? And I'm sure she had 15 kids, loved football, but she was let down at the finish up because she had no inside left.
Panmure Street even had its own football team and would take on anyone.
We are some of the Panmure boys, we are some of the boys. We know our manners and how to spend our tanners. We are expected wherever we go. Doors and windows open wide, open wide. Here we go. Everybody speaks about football, and I'll tell you this about football. You know how important it is to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth? Well, that was football.
If you take the tenements of Glasgow, you know, the inner areas, the streets were the playground. I mean, the houses were too small to do very much in, so people tended to be outside most of the time.
This is the nursery where you learn to dribble as soon as you can walk, where you shoot before you can run. This is the prelude to Hampden or Wembley.
That photo there, he looks about 5 or 6 in it. He just kicked the ball all the time, even before he started school. Well, there's a friend, Thomas McLaughlin, stayed upstairs. Jimmy had a ladder for the back window, and the two of them used to go before they went to school in the morning, have a kick about.
Legendary winger Jimmy Johnson first jinked his way past milk bottles on the outskirts of the city.
When he was younger, he used to put his father's pit boots on, kick the ball, and I think some of the neighbours used to go mad. The poor neighbour down below, I think her light was shaking like anything.
When he became a ball boy at Celtic Park, wee Jimmy seemed destined to play for the club. But one of his future teammates grew up closer to the home of Celtic's fiercest rival.
Now, this is us approaching Govan, just along the road from Ibrox Park.
But as a pupil at St Anthony's, Jim Craig was unlikely to be welcomed at 1950s Ibrox.
There's the school, just here. Well, this is my former primary school. We were only half a mile from Ibrox Park, round the corner from Harmony Row, where Alex Ferguson went to school. But if you were a Catholic, you went to that school, and if you were a Protestant, you went to that school. And I was too young to sort of think there was anything wrong about that, you know. And this is the playground. This is where we used to hone our skills. I think every boy in those days thought he was going to be a footballer, because all we did was play football on the playground.
This is where I was born. This is the boys' bedroom. It was in here, it was just a single room. There were 4 boys, and that's where the 4 boys slept. Into the right here was the kitchen. My ma, she was worst cook in the world. But I'll tell you, she gave you plenty of it, and you were never hungry.
Young Bertie was happy to play for his street, but dreamed of a bigger stage. So when Celtic spotted him at 16 and offered him £20 to sign, Bertie couldn't wait to tell his mum.
I had this £20 one in my hand like that. I never let it loose. It was one of the ones that was about that size. It was inside a newspaper, and I folded it all and put it in my pocket, and that's the way I held it. And I come up here, and my ma, and she turned, "Oh, son," she says, "Aye, ma," she says, "and I've got a wee surprise." And she done that. Honestly, she started to take my fingers out like that, because they were that tight. Oh. And she got this £20 note, and she looked at it like that, and this is what she did. She just put it right down her bra.
£20, the 23 tram, and a gala swagger was enough to get Bertie to Celtic Park. But one boy had a much longer journey to make. For Bobby Lennox, it wasn't just the 27-mile journey from the seaside town of Saltcoats to the big city of Glasgow. The forward had something holding him back.
I was the shyest guy in the world. I would go in and sit there and no talk to him. I mean, I didn't start playing until I was 12 because I was embarrassed going and joining the guys playing football. So I just left, didn't play. I was really a shy boy. It was difficult. I just felt, am I good enough to be here? Should I be here with these guys, you know? And it was difficult.
At 17, Bobby took a conveyor belt job making boxes with the area's big employer, ICI.
Loads and loads of buses sat outside the ICI, and people come piling in, and nearly everybody worked in the ICI. It was a dynamite factory, they made explosives and stuff like that.
The gel ignites, the dynamites, the TNT ammonium nitrates, and still the list is only half complete.
From time to time somebody would get killed or somebody would be hurt, you know. I worked in this big machine and it just kept filling up and I had to knock out boxes with it. And it kept filling up, and when everybody else was finished, I had always a load still to be done, you know. I really hated it.
While playing for the factory football team, Bobby's talents were spotted by Celtic. And the shy boy realised this was his chance to escape the production line.
Up in the train and the smoke belts in the engine, in through the gorbals at that time in the train, and the gorbals at the time wasn't the prettiest place in the world, you know.
Joe, back off.
One member of Steen's team lived within sight of Celtic Park. Raised in a Glasgow tenement, his name would go down in club history. But in his youth, he was almost a victim of the city's biggest killer.
Health experts say the cause of Glasgow's high TB rate was malnutrition during the depression of the 30s, combined with lack of ventilation in the blackout.
Glasgow was a city designed for tuberculosis because there was so much poverty, overcrowding, lack of sunlight, just the ideal breeding ground.
Stevie Chalmers was a promising young striker. In 1955, he fell ill and was rushed to hospital.
He just thought he was unwell and had a cold, I think, and he didn't actually realise how serious it was. And it wasn't until people in beds next to him were getting the curtains pulled round and dying, and he was lying there thinking, I just want to go out and play football, and he was moving his legs at the side of the bed and thinking, why am I here?
Glasgow was winning its battle with TB, but there were still strains of the disease which were fatal.
Tuberculous meningitis was the deadliest disease in Glasgow ever. 100% fatality at that time. It was a terrible disease.
And doctors had to break the devastating news to young Stevie that he had contracted TB meningitis.
We're very sorry. This is the diagnosis. You've got 3 weeks to live.
With time running out, Stevie needed a miracle.
He came under the care of Dr. Peter Mackenzie, a remarkable man. He was a great Ranger supporter. He always talked about Stevie Chalmers as a tremendous gentleman. He really liked him.
No patient at the hospital had ever survived TB meningitis. Dr. Mackenzie decided to try an experimental new drug treatment.
It was a miracle cure. It was not believed that people could survive tuberculous meningitis. And Stevie Chalmers was one of the very first in Scotland.
Stevie never forgot Dr. Mackenzie, and after joining Celtic, he wrote to the Rangers supporting doctor, signing off with, "My success is your success."
I suppose getting TB and realising that actually he was near death was actually probably the thing that really spurred him on to be the footballer he was, and actually the passion that he has probably shows in that.
With Jock Stein in charge, survivor Stevie Chalmers, shy Bobby Lennox, Gallus Bertie Auld, captain Billy McNeill, jinking Jimmy Johnson began to play together like a team. They won a league and cup double in their first full season, which meant they qualified for the European Cup for the first time in the club's history. Stein took his victorious young squad for a 6-week summer tour of America.
started away in Bermuda, Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, Miami, San Francisco, New York.
Jock, he knew what ability we had. He was wanting people to build their own confidence.
And on that tour, the boys from working class Glasgow began to believe in themselves.
Being in America was the start of it. Everybody got to know each other so well and was in each other's pockets, especially with Jimmy and I were in everybody else's pockets.
Jinky and Bobby Lennox, they loved to have a wee song, you know. Pretty Flamingo. Well, that was one of the songs that was out there.
All of the guys call her Flamingo, 'cause her hair glows like the sun.
Every time you were in the plane, they too would start singing and that, you know. It got to the stage where you'd be throwing things at them, you know.
Billy McNeill brought the cine camera on the tour, and for 50 years the reel sat in his attic. Recently rediscovered, the grainy footage doesn't show much of the 11 games, 8 wins, 41 goals. But what it shows clearly is a happy group of pals bonding into a team.
We were in New York, we were told never to get out alone, be sure there's 2 or 3s. And I walking past this opening, this guy jumped out and went for me. Really nearly wet myself, and it was Betty.
We became one as a team, you know what I mean? And it's true, Jock, that all happened.
Are you a disciplinarian? To a certain extent, yes, I would say so, yeah. But I come and go a bit. Probably I'm supposed to be hard, but I'm probably softer than most of them.
Celtic won their final game in LA. They were undefeated on the tour. The boys felt like Hollywood stars.
We were in the movies every time we got up in the morning. I'm not kidding, I was all full of love bites. Self-inflicted, you know.
After 6 weeks on the road, they returned to Glasgow, fired up and raring to go.
My son Bobby was born 9 months to the day his father came back from America. And he's not the only one, there are quite a few of them. God help me if he'd been early. I was in trouble, but no.
It was an excited, rejuvenated Celtic team that kicked off the new season in 1966. Steen was introducing a smart, exhilarating form of attacking football, with Celtic scoring 26 goals in their first 6 games. And the city of Glasgow too had idealistic, ambitious plans to reinvent itself as a modern metropolis.
On that is crammed 150,000 of the city's dwellings.
But that's ridiculous.
Of course it is, by any standards.
What are you going to do about it?
Knock them down.
Glasgow began demolishing the old tenements, and Steen's Celtic began demolishing European opponents. As the modernist Red Road flats rose in the city skyline, Celtic were inventing a new modern brand of football and swept away Swiss champions Zurich.
In the heart of the city, the new Glasgow is taking shape.
The times they were a-changing, and the club was a-changing with them. In a pioneering move, Celtic became the first football club in Britain to publish its own weekly newspaper. The Celtic View was a chance for Jock Steen to speak directly to the fans, to advertise Celtic fags, and in a time before fan forums, the letters page was a platform for lively debate. In 1966, in these pages, controversy erupted when the Celtic View published a picture of the winner of the Miss Celtic competition.
Well, that's the sash. It's a lovely green sash. Celtic Queen, 1966.
Miss Celtic's picture was splashed in the View, but not everyone welcomed the injection of glamour.
Someone had written in to say that they were very surprised at the Celtic View and weren't very happy about the picture because they thought it was a bit immodest. I don't know whether they thought my dress or whatever.
A Mr. Black of Wimbledon declared himself shocked and surprised at the bad taste and low moral standards of the Celtic View.
It's hilarious now. I mean, they said it was the swinging 60s. It must have swung right past me.
But most pages of the Celtic View that season were filled with brilliant news. How Jimmy Johnson inspired Celtic past the French champions Nantes. One of the French players put it poetically, saying that trying to mark wee Jimmy was like trying to pin a wave to the sand. Jinky was Celtic's most famous player, but being a football star was different in an era before agents, before multi-million-pound deals, and certainly before wags in nightclubs.
I met him at the youth club in View Park. I was coming up for about 17, no drink or nothing. I was struggling to get in. There were a wee band used to play. And sometimes Jimmy used to bring his record player to the youth club. Got married when I was 19. I was in the taxi. When he got married and that, we stayed in his mother's back room. I mean, we didn't have money for a house or anything.
Fame was about being able to afford a car and eating like other people ate if they had a few bob, a gammon steak with a bit of pineapple on top of it, that sort of thing. This is not the high life.
The Celtic stars ate at their local cafe and married the girl next door. More pie and beans than posh and begs.
We always met in here, come in here, go to the pictures and come back up and come in here with a Coca-Cola before we went home.
Happy memories.
I'd walk around the road, a wee cuddle, and then I'd run home.
In 1967, the wedding of the year was Elvis and Priscilla, except in Saltcoats. The boss turned up for the big day, but he wasn't so keen when the players' wives turned up for the big games.
He really didn't like the wives to get together for some reason.
If they got after a big game, if the girls were up, we were up in the car, the girls, they stand outside the stadium. And we'd come out and got him afterwards, changed, bathed and changed. He didn't fancy Mrs. Lennox and Mrs. Murdoch maybe sitting there gabbing about something or whatever, you know. He just didn't, he thought, you know, he'd say things like, there's a plumber's wife go and see him fit in a sink. There's a joiner's wife go and see him fit in a cupboard. So why do they come up with the fit, what's your work?
But in the case of Mrs. Johnston, he needn't have worried.
Just went to about 4 or 5 games all in.
For this entire career?
That's terrible, I know, isn't it?
She came one day and she asked me who was Jimmy. And she didn't know which team was which. I said, Agnes, you've got to be kidding on. I said, hey, can you not see Jimmy in that part? That was Agnes.
Agnes didn't know what she was missing. Sometimes there was only one place in Glasgow to be for a big night with singing, dancing and amazing drama.
70,000 voices making a tremendous racket here.
The only game in the run to the final I was at was Vojvodina Novi Sad, the quarter-final. See, when they ran out under the flood, they looked magnificent. You know, they glowed when they ran, you know, the Celtic song would play, Stunning in the Jungle, and all floodlight.
Chalmers, Johnson.
First leg was 1-0 over there, and it was 1 each here, getting into the last couple of minutes. Billy, when you really needed it, you did it, you know. And the ball hits the back of the net. And there's that sort of famous still of the Vojvodina defender on the goal line, the number 6, with his arm up, trying to stop the goalkeeper's, I don't know where he is, I think he's gone for it and Billy's just taking him out.
While some footage of the game survives, the only film of the winning goal was captured by a fan's cinecam, almost focused on his TV set.
Johnny Gallagher. To McNeill. Celtic go through to the semi-final of the European Cup, and Billy McNeill has got them there in the last minute of the game.
Most of Celtic's 1967 season, on and off the pitch, was captured in glorious Technicolor. With remarkable pressings, the club commissioned a film crew to document the season as it unfolded.
Well, I'd done 4 documentaries for STV, and by accident I ran into Bob Kelly, who was then chairman of Celtic, who said, I liked the programmes you did, you know there's a good story to be done about Celtic, would you do it for us? It was a great privilege being allowed to do it, frankly.
For goalkeeper Simpson too,
a dream year. At 36, his 22nd season in senior football.
So there was quite a lot of people involved in it. Oscar Mazzaroli did a couple of shifts on the film. Bill Forsyth, who went on to make Local Hero and everything.
Made for cinematic release, The Celtic Story is a groundbreaking documentary. Not only the story of the club, but featuring fans and players. And for the first time, the supporters got to see beyond the dressing room door.
This can be a year that every one of us can remember, so let's make sure that each player helps each other. Make sure if somebody's having a bad game, somebody near him helps him.
Jock, I mean, he wouldn't allow anything to interfere with football, but he didn't mind a couple of things because he knew a story had to be told.
But as they were shooting The Celtic Story, they could never have guessed how it would end.
Now I'm lost. Yes. I've left it open. Good. Now it's in here, isn't it? Yeah.
50 years ago, a new recruit, costing a club record of £30,000, walked into this dressing room for the very first time.
It's fantastic to walk back in again. Wish I could play, but, you know, past.
But the new boy, Willie Wallace, was quickly initiated into its little secrets.
I don't think a lot of people would know. There was a little glass of whiskey through the back. And if you wanted a wee sip of whiskey before you went out, it was there. Just a stimulant, you know. There was a few who used to have it. Old Feather was one of them. Oh, Ronnie, he was liked a wee snifter just before he went out. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this is when you knew you were playing, when you got to this bit. My first game in Europe for Celtic was the semi-final of the European Cup. Oh, I was nervous. Going out here.
75,000 people, practically all of them cheering Celtic for all the work. Wallace, it's a goal! Wallace,
Things worked out for me. I was lucky enough to score a couple of goals. I thought, well, at least I've paid something back.
inside forward all.
If Wispy's first goal was all about instinct,
And it's a goal for Wallace!
the second was all about guile.
Wallace's second goal!
As Wallace put Jock Stein's training ground theory into match-winning practice.
There he is, look at him!
3-1 in Glasgow, and after a goalless draw in Prague, Celtic became the first British team ever to reach the European Cup final. This feat was all the more remarkable as Celtic were involved in a hard-fought league campaign against one of the great Rangers teams, culminating in a title decider at a rain-soaked Ibrox.
He had a collectiveness about them, a team spirit, great ability, great individuals. I always felt when we played against Celtic in those days, you were playing against 12, because no matter how well you did in the first half in these games, you knew that Jock Stein would do something different at half-time.
Celtic drew the game to win the treble, as two spies looked on. One of them was Helenio Herrera, the manager of Inter Milan, Celtic's next European opponents.
Celtic were in the European Cup final, Rangers were in the Cup Winners' Cup final, and Kilmarnock were in the semi-finals of the old Fairs Cities Cup. That's staggering when you think about that now. Scotland, just in soccer terms, in football terms, was a hotbed.
Sunshine came softly through my window today.
May 1967 was the beginning of the summer of love, but no one in Glasgow was going to San Francisco with a flower in their hair. If they were Celtic fans, they were hoping to travel nearly 2,000 miles to Lisbon with shamrocks in their kilt. A week-long journey through France, over the Pyrenees, across Franco Spain. But fans crammed into any old banger and hit the road.
There were three cars. We were in a Mini Cooper. The big mate had just bought a new Holman. and another Parliament would be more than 1,000.
Every day out in the street, all waving us, and off we set. Green sticky tape along the side of the car. I thought, you know, I'm part of this is me, I'm going to Lisbon.
One of the boys in the other motor, he lost his case before we go to Bishop Briggs, after the roof rack.
You couldn't get a seat in a plane for love nor money, but there was a soft porn magazine. It was called Titbits. The parish priest did all the spade work. He said, there's a magazine running a plane. And he said, they're called Titbits. I said, that seems a bit dodgy. He said, we get 3 seats. There was another priest in the next door parish was going to come as well.
Finding a seat on a plane was one thing. Finding the money, especially for shipyard workers like Jimmy and Danny, was something else.
Supposed to be saving to get engaged. Engaged in the days was a big deal. And I just says to her, I says, look, see this, getting married carry on, I says, saving up for an engagement ring. I says, was I'm wanting to go to the final. End of story. She wasn't a bit pleased.
As Celtic fans began to make their way across the continent, the team arrived in Lisbon to prepare. Steen was leaving nothing to chance, and they brought their own steaks, square sausages, and chops from Scotland. Well fed and rested, the team relaxed in their hotel. And the fans continued on their epic journey.
See, even going in the car, you were getting the toot, 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 and all that with French and everything, because you've seen the registrations, you know, the Germans and the French and all that. You know, they were all for us, you know. Unbelievable.
Nous les referons ensemble, nous les referons ensemble, demain les vendanges de l'amour.
And for one young Celtic fan, their journey took an unexpected turn.
One of the drivers got lost. We ended up in the middle of Nantes. Got into a station bar, there was a few people there, and there was a very attractive young lady behind the bar. Her name was Ghislaine. She was 19, she was a student. I don't know how it happened, but we got on like a house on fire. And within half an hour, I was in love with her. Time just flew in. One point I turned round, and there was my 2 companions with their heads on the table, fast asleep, put her arms round me and gave me a kiss, and I thought, this is the love of my life.
Charles had a choice. Would he Je t'aime Ghislaine, or would he Je t'aime Celtic?
She wanted my Celtic scarf. I said to her, no, we need it for hanging out the window, and I want my Celtic scarf to be in Lisbon. I wakened up my companions, and that was us. We were on the road.
Fans headed south by planes, trains, and automobiles.
We began to see people with green and white scarves. It was a trickle at first, but the nearer we got to Lisbon, it became a flood. It was quite something.
In 1967, the Portuguese capital was very beautiful, very poor, very Catholic, and about to be invaded.
Once we got to Lisbon itself and made our way down to the main square, it was a sea of green and white. The locals were mesmerised. They couldn't believe the colour, they couldn't believe the volume of people there.
At the Stadio Nacional, on the outskirts of the city, Celtic dug out their mismatched training kit for a kickabout, much to the amusement of some immaculately attired onlookers. Celtic's opponents had won the competition twice in the past 3 years. And Inter Milan's Heleno Herrera and Celtic's Jock Steen represented 2 opposing ideologies.
Inter Milan had a reputation for being hugely defensive, and in a way that presented the perfect foil for the Celtic of that time. The team with the best defence in Europe and the team with the best attack in Europe.
Inter played a negative brand of football known as catenaccio. Disciplined, oppressive, stifling creativity. Fascism in a football formation. And in city streets, Celtic fans were getting a glimpse of life under the rule of Portugal's dictator, Salazar.
The one thing that was remarkable is soldiers with guns, you know, and you could see everybody going, what's this, you know? Like, those guns were a reality every day for the Portuguese people. And some of the things that we were doing, like singing in the streets, enjoying ourselves, that wasn't accepted by the regime.
Thursday, May the 25th, 1967, would be a momentous day in Celtic's history. In Glasgow Airport, it was an early start for the thousands of fans flying to Lisbon.
I hadn't even been out of Scotland, never mind out of Europe. Never been on a plane, and just that happy.
We just went on the plane and it was a prop plane.
Prop plane, it wasn't a jet thing, you know. It was fantastic, you know.
My dad and I were sitting up at the front of the plane, and just before the plane took off, this guy stood up and he shouted to the back of the plane, "Right lads, we've got a young girl sitting up here, don't want any cursing or swearing on the way to Lisbon." And I was mortified, absolutely embarrassed.
But we took off from Renfrew, and our first stop was Cardiff. That was to pick up alcohol.
By midday, all of the planes had left, except one.
We were meant to leave at 9:50, but it became clear that our flight was going to be delayed, and the story was it was delayed 1 hour, then a couple of hours.
And then it was delayed, and other people were going.
It's estimated that more than 10,000 Celtic fans followed the boys to Lisbon, and they made friends all the way.
When we got off the plane, they said the bus is outside, so we dived outside. And one of the guys coming on all of a sudden produced a bottle of whiskey and a wee cup. And he half-filled this wee cup and he gave it to the driver. The driver said, "Oh, I'm a Portuguese guy." Whiskey.
Eventually, the last flight left Glasgow.
During the whole flight, it was how long?
From 20,000 feet or 15,000 feet or whatever it is till the plane landed, it was just madness on a plane.
As the kick-off approached, players and fans began to arrive at the Stadio Nacional.
See, when we were going up to that stadium,
The weather was
terrific.
terrific.
Was brilliant. There was trees. There was bushes with flowers on them. Never seen that going to a football match in Scotland. And here we are walking up to this place, and I says to him, "You sure this is for us?
It was just,
you just strolled up, you walked up, it was...
You didn't even through turnstiles or nothing, you know, you just walked
You just
right
walked
up.
into the gate.
Walked in the gate.
Nobody asked you for your ticket.
Your ticket or anything.
Or nothing.
The nerves were starting to kick in, the stadium filled with fans. The cameras were ready to beam the game round the world. And in the skies above, the last flight from Glasgow was coming in to land.
And everything was in slow motion then, because the landing crew were, God knows where they were. We were the only plane, no steps. So I sat down on the ledge and went for it. I didn't realise how big a drop that was. But I was 19, a pretty fit guy, so I went over and I landed my 2 feet, but it's a long way down, you know, and I hit with a thud, but recovered, and there was guys coming behind me, just dropping, and we started running towards the terminal building.
Back home, the great city of Glasgow was a ghost town.
I remember the night of the Celtic game. There was a famous picture that appeared in the Daily Express, and it was looking down Sauchiehall Street, and there was nothing in the street, which was unheard of. It was unbelievable, because everyone was indoors watching this game.
I remember sitting in my living room. My dad was working late, and my mum was like making the dinner. And I just sat there on the edge of the chair. I remember praying. Pathetic.
Reached the moment of truth. Can Celtic become not only the first Scottish, the first British, but the first non-Latin team to win the European Cup?
Everyone from kids in Kilsyth to famous thespians in London waited and watched.
I've been a Celtic supporter all my life. So how could I prepare for the most momentous match ever? So I just ordered my wife off the field. Right, I had 4 children, was it 5 by then? Right, take them out, take the dog out. We couldn't get rid of the cat, so the cat joined me on the sofa, just like this.
As the teams emerged from the tunnel, Jock Stein's men famously burst into the Celtic song.
For it's a grand old team to play for.
It was a lovely, proud feeling when they walked it. Bobby always came out last. That was one of his things. He had to go but last on the park. And it's a sin because they've got these fabulous pictures of the Lisbon Lions walking out in the park, and Bobby's right then, so you can't really see him, you know.
There's Jock Stein on the right.
Can you imagine Inter Milan looking at these guys, you know, and going, what is that? What are we, you know? And they're walking out in the park, me Jinky's looking at Fichetti and saying, are you marking me? Are you marking me? A bunch of boys from Baylis and Bellshill and Salcoats walking out there, taking on the best in Europe.
And me Jimmy says, look at them, wee man, they're like film stars. That's why he says, you want to see their teeth. I says, but can they play?
Here's Johnson.
From the kick-off, Celtic showed that they could play.
Forward shot for Johnson.
You know, we were in this stadium, the sun shining, foreign land, and there we were watching our team play in a European final.
Bennett. And Johnson. On it. Great save by Stevie.
Celtic fans were soon reminded that Streetwise Inter were there to win.
A penalty. He's given it. It's a penalty. It's a penalty.
Sick. Absolutely sick, man. I couldn't believe it.
But they've given away a penalty after only 7 minutes.
He went down like a sack of potatoes, and the referee, I think, was conned into it.
And listen to the Celtic fans and the Portuguese fans. It's 1-0 for Inter.
We're the worst then, you know what I mean? It's knowing the Italian team, you'd think that's it. They've scored, that's it, finished.
End of story.
So it'll be interesting to see whether Inter now come right back on defence.
Catenaccio is Italian for door bolt, and as soon as they were ahead, Inter's defence bolted the door.
Got to score 2. That's it. There's no other way you're going to win it.
Oh, the great one, boys! And then, a brilliant.
Celtic attacked nearly 2,000 miles away. A city held its breath.
Then in the Celtic heart, and even now, Inter won't come out.
Just a massive, massive TV event, you know. My father was working in the Red Road Flats at the time, and he watched the end of the first half in Springburn Road somewhere, in some TV shop with a crowd of people looking in.
While the world watched in black and white,
Oh, great shot, a wonderful save.
Cinema Celtic captured the game in colour. Or at least most of it.
It was only, one camera, so you had to change reels and hope that nobody scored a goal while you were changing reels. I mean, the one incident we missed, we couldn't get, which I've seen on the black and white television version, is when Ronnie Simpson, halfway up into his own half, back heels.
Well, how about that for confidence?
I apologised to Jock and said, we haven't got that just as well. Should never have done that. He was quite raging at the risks he was taking.
The half-time whistle goes, 1-0 in a heartbreaking game, not only for Celtic supporters, but for all those who cherish attacking football.
They hung on, and they proved what they are. They were hard to score against.
Celtic are, and obviously just taking on Inter. They're trying to end the ice age of defensive European football.
Celtic were now facing their biggest challenge. But Stein believed in his team, and his team believed in Stein. The big man had come a long way from the dark coalfields of Lanarkshire to the evening light of Lisbon. The players too had come from kicking a ball on Glasgow streets to a pristine pitch at the very pinnacle of European football. and the fans had spent their life savings to travel nearly 2,000 miles to support the team they loved. Steen had always urged his players to remember who they were, where they came from, and who they played for. He told his skillful young team to remain true to his footballing philosophy. And the goal that ended decades of stifling defensive catenaccio was made in Glasgow.
A block to Murdoch. In comes Gray. Gibble, he scored a great goal! Gibble, a great goal!
What you were doing was excitement, just jumping about. Oh, you're a dancer, you know.
I just greet every time. Every time I see these things. And I greet when Tommy Gemmell scored.
Well, Tommy Gemmell has done this time and time again for Celtic, but it looks as if they've been right up
Don't
against
use this. Oh dear.
In the stadium, in living rooms at home, and across the entire continent, everyone was now willing on the 11 boys from Glasgow.
Oh, he's hit the bar!
The Portuguese around us couldn't believe Celtic were running rings around them, playing this wonderful football.
Celtic were cutting through Inter's defensive system, but time and time again were thwarted by the brilliance of the Inter Milan goalie.
Oh, what a save by Sarti.
That guy was out this planet. And when I seen some of the saves he was coming away with, we're going up. Sarti.
5 minutes left now. 1 goal each.
It was to be the most important 5 minutes in 11 men's lives. The most joyous 5 minutes for the thousands crowded round TVs in an industrial city 2,000 miles away. The most memorable 5 minutes in Celtic Football Club's history.
Gemmell. Murdoch. It's goal! Celtic has scored!
We're in.
Most important goal we ever scored.
I think Chalmers put it in.
To complete the fairy tale, the man who was once told by doctors that he had just weeks to live scored the goal of his life.
It just gives me goosebumps. You hear Chalmers getting shouted, "It's Chalmers!"
Stevie Chalmers put it in.
The cat was flying as high as the roof, and it fell. And then my wife came in, rushing in, thinking I had a heart attack or something.
The crowd started moving. And you went with them, you know. Oh, man.
And the whistle is going, and Celtic have won the European Cup, and onto the field come thousands of Celtic fans. This is a great moment.
They won! They won!
You just jumped about wild. And you couldn't get near them because every player was... Oh, there were hundreds around them, you know, you just couldn't...
There was an explosion of joy in Lisbon and Glasgow. Fighting his way through the delirious crowd was an exhausted Billy McNeill. Handsome and proud, every inch the inspirational captain. The man they called Caesar lifted the cup for all the world to see.
Fantastic moment for Celtic, and how well they deserve it.
It's a frozen in time moment, because I still picture Big Billy up with the cup, and it will remain in my mind till the day I die.
"50 years after that win, Celtic fans are still celebrating Lisbon.
The 67th minute. Now, come here. What other club or what other support in the world would have that in their mind to do that?
1967 was not just a triumph for Glasgow Celtic. 1967 was a triumph for Glasgow. No European Cup winning side before or since has won the trophy with a team of 11 local heroes.
Mythical. There's no other word to describe it. It's mythical. The 300 Spartans or the defenders of the Alamo or something. There's a heroism about them.
I meet people and they'll say to me, "Oh, what's your name, Willie?" I say, "Willie, what?" "Oh, you Lisbon Lion." It doesn't matter where you are in the world. And it just changed our lives forever.
The sunburn has long since faded, but the fans who went to Lisbon still have their own souvenirs and their own stories to tell.
When I got home, I got my Celtic scarf and I parcelled it up and I wrote a letter to Ghislaine, Bar de la Gare, Nantes. I never heard from her.
I got married to her about a year later.
Honeymoon in Lisbon.
Honeymoon in Lisbon. No. It was a caravan in Girvan, actually.
And glories hovering over Parkhead.
Will never be equalled, I don't think. Absolutely amazing.
And I can imagine the scenes back in Scotland tonight.
From Maryhill, Saltcoats, Uddingston, Govan and all across Glasgow came football daft wee boys with big dreams.
It's very hard to look back without, a great sense of loss. There's a photograph just inside the door of Celtic Park, which is just the 11 players. Just taken shortly after that day. That's my memory.
Look, brothers. I loved them. Absolutely loved them.
I miss them.
Simpson, Craig Gemmell, Murdoch, McNeill, Clark, Lennox, Ogg, Johnson, Wallace, Chalmers, the Lions of Lisbon.
Bobby just always said he would never change his time. I'm going to get emotional now. That that was his team, that was his time. He loved playing. He loved Celtic always anyway, but I mean, he loved that, and that was his time, and he wouldn't change his time. He would never have, that was what he just said, he would never have changed his time.
And are you willing to run? You promised me something to believe.